teachers are striking, right? They've been striking this week, not because of money or anything like that, but because apparently they're being treated as punch bags for violent pupils at their schools. And I've also heard reports about people in Scotland criticising inclusion policies, i.e. where the worst behaved kids, we're going to hug you, we're going to keep you in the classrooms, even though you're treating us like absolute doormats and abuse victims. You are in education, Tom. Where are you on it all?
I absolutely support teachers' right to strike. Indeed, any workers, right, if they're in an environment, in a working environment that is unsafe, management or the boards or the resources are not there to make that environment safe. You wouldn't come into this studio if it was an unsafe environment. I don't think our teachers should as well. And
agreed, but let's look at what's going on then. Why are pupils in schools having the absolute audacity to physically assault teachers?
Well, that's not acceptable. And there are things like pupil behaviour units, but we've seen actually a cut in those units in local authorities over the last few years. And, you know, there are indeed behaviour strategies that the professionals can work together and come up with to deal with those from dysfunctional homes often who need that extra support and they don't get it. But what I would say is just, you know, because actually part of the question here was, are today's teenagers absolutely feral, you know, and somehow
have they lost respect for authority?
No, I don't think they have, because actually if you look at the number of permanent pupil exclusions in education, it's running at 0.04%. In other words, it's about 4 in every 10,000 pupils have major behavioural issues and they end up either being temporarily or permanently excluded. Now, it's not me underplaying. If you're a teacher and you've got a disruptive pupil who's threatening you with violence, and we have seen teachers killed, haven't we, in the last few years in school, but I just don't think, A, it's anything like the problem people are saying it is, and in the end, it's about resourcing local authorities.
Go on.
Look, I don't buy that, by the way. I had it in my wider family. I had I have a relation who was a teacher, and it was nightmarish.
I thought he was going to say you had all these problem kids. I thought he was going to disprove his statistics by saying that just in your family alone you had all of these wrong ones.
This person was not very tall, 15-year-old kids in the comprehensive, right? Big guys, right? Glowering, threatening, telling you to F off, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Right, and this is where the whole breakdown. You're on your detention, you're going to be excluded. Boom, along comes the head teacher, some withering figure. You're always claiming that they're all great and they're all geniuses and they're all worth 200 grand a year, right? But actually what happened was the deputy head would come along and said, look, can we just allow Tom to come back in again? Do we have to have detention and all the rest of it? Rather, because it's no point having your point about 0.004. You try excluding, you know this as well as I do. You try excluding pupils from a school. It is a nightmare. No backing from local education, no backing from the head teacher who looks to local education for his or her preferment, right? The whole thing is a nightmare. Yeah. You're not trying to tell me these people go on strike because they want to do this. Yeah. They want to do this because they're making a point. And I totally accept that. Yeah. And I bet you every teacher that is watching this show tonight will be saying, do you know what? We know a shocking example of a 15-year-old, 14-year-old lad literally either threatening me or swearing at me. Yeah, I'm not getting my support at the top of the
but you're describing the system, symptoms. You're just skirting really around what the solution of the problem is.
Because that's more than a symptom. That is actually what has led to these people walking out.
But a symptom of these disrupted pupils being left in schools is because local authorities aren't being funded adequately with these pupil referral units and behavioural problems.
And even if they are about money, isn't it? Why isn't it
it's not just about money, Calvin, but it's about saying...
Isn't it about straightforward discipline?
Right. Well, look, even if the head teachers were to exclude these pupils, then where do they go? They're in the town centres, you know, antisocial, violent,
but
they're hanging out.
These children who are in the class are getting the education that their parents' taxes have paid for, right? And that is another example.
My point is they don't have to be in the classroom. If there are behavioural problems, they can be still within a school, but have one-to-one professional support. But you do need resources, Calvin, for that. And it has to be resourced properly. I'm not saying for a moment...
Are you saying... OK, can I just say that probably of the two of us, you're further to the left than I am, right?
Fine.
It's a guess.
You can give me that label if you like. I feel a bit politically homeless these days, but you can give me that label.
But are you saying when Labour come in, then that they will write another huge cheque to try and deal with these legitimate concerns of a workforce? the fact that they're teachers, you know, if this was happening on the railways, the RMT would be on strike even more often than it is now.
But you know what I did think actually was interesting about the Shadow Secretary of State Bridget Phillipson's speech this week, where she talked about, you know, reform of Ofsted. That was the kind of headline around you moving away from these single grades. But actually the underreported part of her speech was she was saying that a Labour government would be looking as much in terms of what goes on outside the school, parenting, early years, the support, as much as what we talk about in terms of what's going on inside the school. Everything you just said to me is about what's going on inside the school. We've got to look at what's going on outside school.
All right, I like the academic view of it, all this, that and the other, but the actual reality, right, in a difficult area like Barry, right, which hasn't got a lot of resource, right, is that these people feel so alarmed at their threat to their physicality that they're going on strike. What are we going to do to protect them? I say we should actually just turf out those that don't want to learn and are prepared to create violence towards a teacher.
Well,
How wrong is that?
In Scotland, apparently they have this inclusion strategy, and it's all about essentially stopping teachers from singling these bad kids out. And it's all about restorative methods and trying to do all of these nice kind things. But when you listen to examples from teachers, I had a boy, says one, I had a boy who used to throw a chair at my head every single week. Kids push past me, they run full pelt into you, they knock you over, they kick you. I mean, as a parent, I sit here and I think, what would I do if I got wind of the fact that my child had been kicking teachers? I mean, I am laughing and cringing because over my dead body would my child be behaving in a way where he thought it was acceptable that he could kick a teacher, right? And many people are getting in touch now, and Jean, as for example, has said, the power in our schools is now with the pupils, not the teachers. A teacher can't even put a hand on a pupil in a crowded corridor to move them along without being accused of assault. Once those kind of allegations is made, the latter basically doesn't have any say until they ultimately end up in courts. Rebecca says, I worked in a school, it was constant violence, but the teachers were not allowed to do anything about it. Jewel says, my daughter is a teacher, behaviour has gone down the pan because no one is allowed to discipline the children anymore because you might hurt their feelings. Teachers have no power in their own classroom anymore. Judy, I mean, I could go on, I'm an ex-teacher. Basically, teachers in my day were allowed to discipline their children. The government took those powers away from us, and now what we need to see is a return to that, where teachers have the right to discipline children in schools.
Well, I don't support the idea of bringing back the birch, you know, and corporal punishment.
Not about bringing back the birch. That's carrying the argument.
Yeah, but that's the undertone, I think.
No,
a lot of those.
It's not.
Well, some people do say that, by the way, just to be clear. Some people do say it.
Because there was a school in England that had a similar problem. The teachers went out on strike because there was violence towards teachers, and it was resolved actually with a £500,000 investment that the school governors and the local authority agreed to put in, including these behavioural support units.
Which school was that?
Well, it was a school in Kent last year, which is a very similar case to this, actually. And, of course, you know, Michelle was right, it happens too frequently up and down the land in too many of our schools. I'm not for a minute justifying, you know, my partner is a teacher, and, you know, I've heard some of these horror stories of particularly persistent, disruptive children who do need either to be taken out of the school and supported, but I don't favour just banishing them out into the local town centre.
Why do you think we're having this debate? Why is this not happening? It's not happening to the point where one school, and I encourage all teachers, actually, I'm not on the favour front, but every teacher group should think about walking out so that they can have legitimate, they can go to work with safety.
Yeah.
There are signs. You go on the railways, the signs, you're not allowed to abuse.
Don't abuse that. But I think there is just a wider point, which is about the professional status of teaching these days compared to when you and I were at school decades ago, right? And, you know, I had the privilege of being taught, I suppose, by the wartime generation. I grew up in the 70s, you know, they got a bit elderly and they went into teaching. So, of course, there was a different mindset in the school about what discipline, good moral value, citizenship meant. And I do think, you know, when we've got an education system now that where the professional status has been much diminished over recent years. We're not paying teachers enough. There's massive burnout in the profession. After 5 years, so many teachers are leaving.